Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our annual Brain Gain Neurofeedback Conference. With me in the studio today, I have Charmaine Botha, ECD specialist, and today we're going to be talking about brain development and the mess we're making of it. Now, my name is Stephné Botha, and I've been in the industry for more than 10 years as a neurofeedback practitioner and ECD trainer and facilitator. And over the past couple of years, I have seen something that really saddens my heart. And I'm sure Charmaine will be able to testify that this is something that she also sees, where children get labeled with labels such as ADD, ADHD, and being naughty, when in fact it is because we made a mess of things. So today I'm going to be speaking to you about the role of movement in the development of a child's brain. Now, I want you to just think of your own scenario at home. Living in South Africa as it is today, we don't have a space where children can play outside and not feel threatened or unsafe. So many of our children today grow up inside a townhouse, in front of a TV, in front of the Xbox, and the only interaction they have with other friends and the opportunity to play outside is at a school. And now the sad thing that has happened, and a new thing that is sort of shown itself, is that schools think it's very, very cute and very good of them for a child to be able to read and write before they were supposed to do that. So what we are finding in the ECD sector, and I'm sure Charmaine will be able to confirm that, is that many preschools start with fine motor skills before the gross motor skills were actually completed, or the development there was completed, which then ultimately leads to a lot of problems because they think that it is cool or nice, or that the primary schools will prefer their children if at the age of 4 they can write their names and color in within the lines. In today's session, we are going to discuss why that is not such a good idea, and hopefully we can break open a few things and perhaps just cause a little bit of a mind shift with you as well. As we go along, I'm going to also speak to Charmaine and ask her to give me some input on that. But let's start off with, why do you expect a child to sit still at school or at home or at the table when in fact we were designed to move? I recently read a book by Dr. Melody de Jager, and it really changed the way I looked at things. Thinking of conception. If you think of conception, where you have the sperm joining the egg, movement takes place. It's not an inactive process, a lot of movement. You can imagine almost like an explosion taking place when the two connect. Then cell division starts, and the one cell turns into 2 and it starts multiplying, and you have the little baby developing through movement. In the fetus, the little baby moves continually. It's those mommies who have been pregnant, who have had little ones, you know that sometimes they really move inside there. Childbirth is a very active process. And then breathing is an active process. Your heart beating is an active process. Hearing, seeing, tasting, smelling, all of that we see them as active processes. Living is an active process. And then my question is, why then do we expect children to sit still when they go to school? If you think of a nursery school child, they get an opportunity to play outside a lot, and then they come in, you teach them all sorts of new concepts, they play with clay and blocks, etc. And when they hit grade 1, the message is sit still and listen. To me and my way of thinking, that is a completely unnatural process. And Dr. Melody de Jager actually goes on to explain that a child or a human's blueprint develops through movement. Now, when a baby is born, the baby will have gazillions of neurons in the brain. The problem is those neurons haven't all made connections with each other. Now, just to explain neurons for you, in the brain and throughout the body, you will have sensory or motor neurons. Your sensory neuron is designed to react to your senses, to what you see, smell, hear, taste, etc. So, for example, if I by mistake touch a hot plate, the sensory neuron will pick up immense heat, and the message will go through in the blink of an eye, and the motor neuron will send back the message to say, pull away, get your finger off the heat. So for those connections to happen in the brain, Dr. Melody de Jager says that we have to move. On Monday, we had our first webinar with Charmaine, and she spoke about the development of language, and she had such a beautiful way of explaining. To get the connection in the brain, it's almost like a car driving on a lawn, and the more you drive over the same place, it actually creates a road in the grass. And this is what needs to happen. And if the child is not actively involved, a lot of the neural connections will not take place. All right, so point number one, we need to focus on movement with the children, because if they don't move, we are going to struggle to get the connections to make in the brain. Charmaine, just from your point of view, you are a nursery school owner. You've been teaching nursery school children for years. You're also the owner of Edu Experts, and you do training for teachers. What is your experience in terms of schools not allowing children to move?
Stephanie, I agree wholeheartedly with what you've said. We've seen, especially in the last 5 years, that there's such a competitiveness amongst the preschools that they've actually neglected, like we spoke yesterday, to look at the developmental milestones. For a child, there's a triangle, and for a child to reach optimally what they should be able to reach, the foundation should be solid. So if their core muscles and their muscles aren't developed, then the brain cannot function. The whole house will topple, and it will be a house of cards that falls down. So my experience at this point in time is that they're rushing things, and they aren't allowing enough time within their curriculum for these children to experience things with the whole body. As you said, Dr. Melody said, the integration of those 5 senses and the movement of the fine and the large muscles are key to the development of the brain.
Absolutely. I cannot emphasize that enough. As a neurofeedback practitioner, we work with children who struggle with concentration, and I've also noticed over the last couple of years that the highest concentration of cases where people come and say, please help me, is normally children going from nursery school into the foundation phase, where all of a sudden they are expected to sit still. So let's look at how development should take place. Dr. Melody de Jager refers to what we call the primitive reflex system. So I'm going to quickly take you through that. She says a child's human blueprint develops through an active process driven by the primitive reflex system between birth and 14 months. Now, when a baby is born, one of the first things they check in theater is the APGAR score of the baby, where they do certain things to check reaction to see if the reflex system is in fact working. Now, the primitive reflex system uses simple movements to cause neural connections to take place. So when you speak to a baby and they hear it and they recognize the voice, then a neural connection is made. I always say to my students when I speak to them, when a baby is born, they can do very little. They can scream, they can eat, they can sleep, and they can poop, and they can pee. And that's what they can do. But very soon after birth, they realize if I feel uncomfortable, so there's a sensory experience and they don't feel comfortable, the connection is made. If I open up my mouth and I start screaming my lungs out, somebody will fix it. So there we go, bam, connection made. If I'm dissatisfied or uncomfortable, I need to let people know about it. And as they grow older, more and more and more connections happen. All right, so because of primitive reflex movements, the connections in the brain take place, and the connections actually then happen between the brain, the organs, the muscles, and everything in the body. So think again, always think of the baby. If you didn't allow the baby to move or to cry or express themselves, many of the connections will not happen. So according to Dr. de Jager, movement is key to physical development as well as cognitive development. And I'm going to show you that now. So the idea is if a child does not move enough and we don't have all of the integrations in the brain happening and the connections made, you will have a child that struggles at school. Never before have we had so many children that have been diagnosed with ADD, ADHD, sensory integration issues, dyslexia, all sorts of learning disabilities that could have been prevented if we allowed the little ones to move. So, if you think of the development of a child, physical development always takes first priority in the brain. So the brain is going to make sure that the child's physical development takes place, because sensory and motor integrations are crucial for any further development to happen. So remember what I said in terms of sensory and the motor. Sensory, God gave us the different senses to see, to smell, taste, hear, etc. And the baby becomes aware of the external environment through the sensory system. What has to happen now is that the brain needs to make sense of the senses. And then the connections happen, and the motor neuron can give you a reaction. In terms of, I am cold, put something hot on. I'm walking past a table, I need to walk so far, because one of the senses that's not always spoken about is your sense of where your body is in terms of items that you're working with or working around. So, very important. Physical development happens through movement. If the physical happens, the sensory will happen, the motor integrations will happen, and that will lay down the foundation for emotional, social, and intellectual development or skills later on. Now, not doing this, not allowing this to happen, putting a baby in a car chair and in front of the television, you are only allowing visual and auditory development to happen. Movement is not an option. If you do that, you will find that children will not reach a milestone, or they will skip a milestone. And if they skip the milestone, you can know that there will be delays in their social, emotional, or intellectual development. I very often speak to mommies, and then they tell me that their child was so clever or so cool or so nice or so sweet, they skipped the crawling phase. Now, crawling is a milestone that has to happen. And if you skip that, in other words, the baby pulls himself up against the table, he stands and he starts walking, and he never crawled. There are certain integrations in the brain that cannot happen. I know Charmaine is really passionate about babies that have to crawl. Could you perhaps just explain to the audience the importance of that?
Goodness, Steph, this is such a big thing. I'm just going to give a few examples. If you look at the distance that a baby pushes himself up from the ground, that is the distance that you need when you read. So for the development of those eye muscles, they have to crawl. And then when they are pushing themselves up, we're looking at gravity that's pushing them from above, and them being able to keep their posture up straight. And it also develops their core muscles. And without core muscles and neck muscles, we struggle with things like mathematics later. Children that then obviously can't pull their body weight bilaterally on both sides, or hang on a monkey bar later on, they will not be able to do sums right the way they should. They're also going to skip. So not crawling leads to so many remedial problems. And that's why we keep on saying to parents, you have to make sure that there aren't any potholes. You've got to go back and make sure that those integrations have taken place. And if they've missed that phase, you can take them back a bit, play games on the floor, crawl with them, make an effort to pick up where they've left out, and then work on that. That's crucial. Otherwise, that connection is not made, and it will remain a remedial problem for the rest of their lives.
Absolutely. That I cannot emphasize that enough. It's exactly like Charmaine now said. If the movement doesn't happen, the connection will not happen. And a mind-blowing statement for me is where Dr. Melody de Jager said, and this is wow, if a child aged 6, let's just use 6 as an example, aged 6, this is when they normally are in grade R, some of them are in grade 1 already. If this child struggles to sit still for 10 minutes, it could be because of a physical development delay. Remember what I said? Physical movement causes connections in the brain to take place. If the child did not go through all of the phases, didn't have all the movement taking place, some of the connections will not be made. And according to her, she says such children will start moving around involuntarily. in order for the brain to try and complete the sensory motor wiring that did not take place. Now, when I read that, that was for me, oh my word, oh my goodness, this is profound, because in grade 1, never like ever before have you had so many children that the mommy come and they walk into my practice and they say, my child has been diagnosed with ADHD. Now, ADHD means attention deficit with hyperactivity disorder, which means child cannot sit still. And this for me was like, oh wow, it could be that this child does not have ADHD, but in fact some of the connections didn't take place, and this child's body is desperately trying to get the connections to take place in order for the child to be able to perform scholastically. So my message out there today is you cannot neglect the big movements for the child. They have to play. In preschool, play, because they learn through play. By parking them down on their bums with a pencil and a worksheet at a too early age, you are actually causing a lot of problems later in school.
Steph, there's just one thing. I really think that you can actually integrate learning with play. And people shouldn't just let them play without purpose. Every play should have a purpose. A teacher should plan that play, and you should look at the outcomes and the goals for that play. So, for example, writing a letter 1 should be experienced with the whole body for it to make sense and to be connected in the brain as the number 1. Counting and clapping and moving and jumping and looking at things that look like a 1, drawing in the sand, drawing in rice. Those are the connections that are needed for this child to remember this symbol means 1. So instead of just putting down a piece of paper and seeing how many pieces of paper you can send home, rather let that child go home and express what they've learned with their whole body throughout the whole day. So the way we teach and the way we train and the way we assess has to change.
Absolutely, I do agree. So to recap, remember the primitive reflex system is designed for the child to move, to make the connections. This takes place between the ages of birth and 14 months. Preventing that from happening will cause delays in achieving milestones or achieving milestones in the incorrect order, and this is going to cause a lot of issues at school. Please remember, when a child develops, they develop as a whole, okay? But obviously, there are certain phases, and if we take you through the phases, I quickly just want to say physical development normally starts from birth up to about 14 months. Now, that is the period where the primitive reflex system does its job. And like she said now, if in that time it isn't completed, the child will continue moving in an attempt to make the connections. Emotional development starts from about 14 months to 4 years. Social development also happens from about 14 months, but closer to 4 years. So you'll find in your baby classes that the older they get, the more socially interactive they become, and then your intellectual development happens between the ages of 4 and 11 years. Now, the question that many people ask is, and this is where my passion comes in, we live in a society where a pilletjie, the quick fix, this is what we want, you know. If the child cannot sit still, gooi vir hom 'n pilletjie. If he's naughty in class, give him a pilletjie. And I believe that is the wrong way around. That should be the last resort. Now, the question is, can children outgrow this? Can children who struggle, who have issues at school, can we address this? So remember, in a normal system with normal movements, the primitive reflex system will deal with all of these issues up until the age of 14 months. Then we assume all of the connections have taken place. If this did not happen, the primitive reflex system will continue to try and make the connections. So you are going to have to assist the child in that case. So most children, if the connections have all been made, you'll have normal behavioral issues, or sometimes child just being a child. But if it really becomes a distraction, you have to take into consideration that uncontrollable movement in a class. Boetie that cannot sit still. He's forever riding on his chair, or teacher, can I go to the bathroom? Always the same child, and you get so irritated. That could be a distress signal that some of the connections hasn't taken place. So, like a big red letter, SOS, help me. So what can we do? You cannot leave this child. You can't, because they're not going to outgrow it by themselves. They will need some remedial help. Now, we have brilliant remedial teachers out there that will be able to recognize this and deal with it. My opinion, we should try and prevent that from happening. We should absolutely change, like Charmaine said, change the way in which we teach, change the way in which we plan. Unfortunately, parents want to see the worksheets. If they don't see the worksheet, they think that the school didn't do anything, and that is the wrong way around. We've got enough book work when we go to big school. So yeah,
you know what, Steph, with the worksheets, I think parents just need to be trained themselves. They don't know what to expect. They see other people's schools are bringing a lot, the other children that they see at a birthday party are bringing a lot of worksheets, so why are we not sending worksheets home? But if you as a school actually go, or you as a caregiver or whatever, and you explain, this is what we're working on, this is what we're doing this week, please help us integrate these songs, and then the parents actually understand why worksheets aren't going home. So it's not because they want to be difficult, it's a lack of knowledge. So if you open their eyes and show them, have a Zoom session with them, have a meeting, do something to inform them, keep them informed, and they will be absolutely happy that they know you're in control of their child's learning.
I agree. So movement is key. What to do if you have a child in your school, perhaps a nursery school or a primary school, and you see, oh my goodness, here's a problem. Children being disruptive, etc. There are certain things we can do, and this is now from my side, this is what I can do and how I can help you. We have an assessment that we do at Brain Gain, and it's called a TESCA assessment. It's a test for variables of attention, but we bring in an emotional component. So we look at the child's ability to concentrate. It's age specific and gender specific. And then we look at the emotional factors, and then we see, okay, there's a problem with concentration. We also do a motor skills assessment where we check, is the child able to reach the milestones in terms of what is expected of them at the specific age. If there is a problem, we will immediately inform the parent, we'll inform the teacher, and then we will have to make a decision on what can we do. Mostly, children need to get moving. Children need to go, and depending obviously on the scores that we get from the assessment, we'll be able to refer to perhaps an occupational therapist or a biokineticist, or just simply programs where the children start moving. There are many preschool programs that you can do, that you can get the children to move. If they are older, then yes, then we'll have to have a team effort to get the children to make the connections in the brain.
Can I maybe ask Steph, would it be possible for adults, because I realize now that adults also have a problem and they just cannot concentrate. Some of them also sit and shake their legs and they can't sit still. Would Brain Gain help for somebody who's already past the ages that you've mentioned?
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you that you have to go to gym now to make the connection. So you can breathe easily now. But definitely, many adults, the problem with an adult with a concentration issue is you've had it all your life. And you've learned to sort of mask it so that people don't know. I once worked with a corporate organization and I tested many of the workers there. One of the key managers there was the financial manager, and he came in for a test and his test was a disaster. And I thought, how am I going to tell this man your concentration levels are
off the charts?
Yeah, I wanted to say another word. And I realized I just have to tell him this, and I sat with him and I explained to him, and he said to me, it was like a light that went on, and he said to me, now I understand why I have to go in on a Saturday to get my work done. So all of his life this has been a problem. He sort of learned to mask it, he's learned to work around it, and people sort of just become, okay, well that's how it is, there's nothing I can do about it, which is not true. We can fix it. The first step is to just understand what the problem is. Obviously, the sooner we get to the problem, the sooner we can fix it. And in most of the cases, we can fix it without having to go the medication route. For an adult, absolutely, we can help you. We do that through a process of neurofeedback, where we actually teach the brain to self-regulate. So you might think that I'm going to ask you to read pages and pages and memorize and practice or exercise your memory skills. Not at all. It's a very simple technique where we actually teach the brain to self-regulate, and then next time you're in a situation where you need to concentrate, oh my goodness, there we go, it worked and I'm fine. So absolutely, brain gain is for everyone. Today I specifically spoke about the prevention of problems academically, and I really just feel that people need to look at their curriculums and make time for the children to climb up the ladder, slide down the slide, make an opportunity for the child to fall down and get up. You know, yes, we don't want the children to hurt themselves, but if I bump my foot against a rock once, next time I'm going to sort of lift my foot a little bit higher. It's all about perception and bodily awareness. So mommies need to stop doing everything for their kiddies. That's also a real big problem.
Or the helicopter mommies.
Oh yeah, you can stand there while they're walking towards the rock, and rather assist them to get over it, but don't pick them up and put them over it, because they're never going to learn. So yes, that is my story today. If you have any extra questions that you would like to ask us, you can go to our websites. I've listed 2 websites there for you. The one is the braingainworld.com website. I've got my contact details on there. You are more than welcome to contact me. For any teachers out there who want to know more about curriculum development, I've got the website on screen there, www.eduexperts.co.za, where you can also get information about curriculums, training, teaching, etc., so that we can make sure that we now work on a generation of winners and not a generation of remedial candidates.
Okay.
Charmaine, thank you so much for being with me today. And Christian behind the camera, thank you so much. And I hope you all learned a lot today and you will start moving those kiddies.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.